Greetings, my name's Monk Rowe and I'm the Joe Williams Director of the Fillius Jazz Archive at Hamilton College in Clinton, New York. Happy to say that March 2020 marks our 25th anniversary, 25 years of collecting videotaped interviews with jazz musicians all over the country, and we have selected 10 excerpts, no easy task, to demonstrate the breadth of the interviews and the content within them. Among these excerpts are stories of childhood experiences that had positive ramifications for a number of jazz musicians. We're going to hear an example of why and how jazz became a global music, two informative anecdotes from notable women jazz artists, significant changes that have occurred in jazz about the learning process, an informed opinion on jazz and race, and the importance of recognizing and thinking twice when opportunity knocks. I hope you enjoy the interviews and that you check out the full sessions with all these jazz artists that are currently on the Fillius Jazz Archive YouTube channel. Thanks a lot. When did you get the first idea of listening to an improvised solo and doing what you do with it?
I have to laugh because I'm just thinking about all that stuff, you know, because I'm going to write my book, you know.
Good.
So I've started to think about that, and it's amazing where I got the idea to write what is now known as vocalese was when I was a kid. You know, it was in the middle of the Depression, and you have no idea how hard times were in the Depression. I mean, people talk of hard times now. These are luxury hard times, you know, compared to those times. Red Fox had something in his act about that. He said, times were so hard that one day my father was sitting on the front step and he hollered up and said, "Martha, the garbage man's coming." And she said, "Tell him to leave 3 cans."
Oh, that's hard. That is hard.
That's right. Times were tough, and there were my father, my mother, and 15 children. 12 boys and 3 girls in the Depression. So it was very, very difficult. So I didn't have a nickel to buy popcorn and a dime to go into the movie theater. Mm-hmm. You know, with all my brothers and sisters, you know, my father just couldn't afford to give everybody a dime to get in and a nickel to buy popcorn. Yeah. So we all had to find some way of finding 15 cents on Saturdays to go to the movies, you know. And so my brothers would go out and what we call junk, you know, they would go junking, which was they'd walk through the alleys. At that time, every street had a back part, you know, which was the alley, and people would throw away things, papers, old lamps that broke, you know, all these they would pick up in a wagon or a cart and take them to the junkyard, and you'd be surprised how everything's worth something. Yeah. And this guy would buy the things off of them maybe for 25 cents. Well, there's a quarter you got. Wow. You can take somebody else to the movies, and you got a nickel for the popcorn. You know. So we used to do that. I used to go into the men's room of the bus station or the train station, and when somebody was going to put a nickel into the slot to go to the lavatory, I'd say, "Wait a minute, you know. Just give me the nickel," and I would crawl down underneath, open the door, and make 15 cents. After I did that 3 times, I would go to the movies and have a nickel for the popcorn. Then I found out something else. People played the jukebox, and it cost a nickel. So I loved all that stuff that was on the jukebox, and I could hum most of those songs. So I said, why don't you learn those songs, you know? And so I would learn the solos, you know. And then I would stand in front of the jukebox, and when somebody was going to play, I said, "Wait a minute, don't put the nickel in yet. what are you going to play? And they would say, Yard Dog Mazurka by Jimmy Lunsford. I said, don't put it in there, give it to me, and I'll sing it.
Oh, man.
And they couldn't resist that, you know, so they would give me the nickel, and I would sing, I would sing the whole thing solo and all, and the whole place would be listening.
Oh, that's fantastic. And how old were you then?
I was about 13.
Oh, man.
And I would earn enough money, and then I would go to the movies. You know? And I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Until I wrote Sing a Song of Basie. And I said, hey, yeah, I know how to do this.
Yeah. Was there a point where you said, music's going to be my career?
Right.
A definite,
I can remember it like it was yesterday. There used to be Ted Husing's bandstand. Ted Husing, I think, originally was a sports car, enthusiast or whatever.
oh,
And he had he played popular music from 3 to 6 every day. I forget what the station was, WJZ or WOR, something like that. And the last 15 minutes he played Dixieland band music, you know, and I liked that. I liked the way those bands sounded, you know. I liked it especially because the clarinet was free. And then on Saturday mornings from 11 to 12, he'd play a whole hour of all these different people, you know, Dixieland jazz bands, whether it be, you know, Tony Parenti or Wild Bill Davison or, you know, who you name it, and whoever was around at that time. And one day he played a Muggsy Spanier recording of Muggsy Spanier's Ragtimers, and they were playing Memphis Blues. And I was just standing in the kitchen listening, I remember, you know, and I heard this, because the radio was on top of the ice box, you know, and I heard this instrument growling and grunting and and this beautiful background, like organ in the back of him, you know, the band playing whole notes. And it was Pee Wee Russell playing clarinet. Well, you know, you can go look at paintings, you can read books, you can see movies, you can listen to music. And if you haven't had a musical experience from any one of those things, you're never really going to be hooked. But I mean, if a book can make you laugh and cry, and the same with a painting or whatever, if you can experience something, well, that was, you know, prior to that, you just listen. You know, like a fan. You know,
yeah,
that's good, yay. But if it doesn't really grab you emotionally, yeah. And I stood there, I remember, transfixed, looking at that, you know, radio, and I said, that's it. I want to do that for the rest of my life.
Humming.
Humming, actually, wow.
And then I'll let somebody else talk.
You pick a humming. Boy, well, I guess the only way to do it is to tell you the way it really was. Humming was written about an old woman who lived on my street when I was a little boy again in Tallahassee. Miss Sally was her name. Miss Sally. Southern people have strange ways of saying things, but there was Mrs. Coleman lived there, Mrs. Laster lived up the street, Mr. Laster. Miss Sally was about 80 years old, but she was Miss Sally. There was no man there. She was a tall black woman, and I describe it, she looked like they looked in roots, like the lady looked at, she wore that long dress as long as an evening gown, and she wore an apron, and the apron was as long as the dress. And Miss Sally must have been about 6 feet tall. She was tall, African-looking black woman. Miss Sally sat in this rocking chair on her porch, and her front porch was, of course, the houses were little board, you know, wooden houses. She sat in this rocking chair on the front porch, And she had a loose board on that porch, and that's where she had the rocking chair. And Miss Sally would sit there and rock, and like, for example, shelling peas. You take the peas out the shell. She'd take the peas out the shell, drop the peas in the pot that she was holding in her lap, and the hulls in the apron behind the pot. Now and then, she'd move the pot and dump the shells on a piece of paper on the floor, and then go back to shelling peas. Meanwhile, she would rock.
Mm-hmm.
And on that loose board, when she'd rock forward, the board would hit boom. When she'd rock backwards, the board would hit from the front and rear, boom. So she'd be rocking boom, 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 boom. All us little boys used to come by. We used to like to, because Miss Sally was a bit eccentric. You know, at least I know now that she's eccentric. We just thought Miss Sally was crazy. But after I went to college, I learned that there was such a word as eccentricity. Now, once we'd keep this, she'd keep this stuff going. We'd say, Miss Sally, you want us to fix that board? Miss Sally would say, get the hell out. So we'd leave. Now, years later, when I was thinking about that again, I wrote this song. Oh, I left out a part. Miss Sally used to hum little churchy sounding things. So it was she'd hum. Kind of gospel sound.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, boom, 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 boom.
You gotta hear the song.
So I wrote the song. A little later on, and this is the addendum to it, I was living in New Jersey and had this big house, and my mother was visiting. And my mother came downstairs one morning, and she had been listening to radio at night. And my mama said, listen, why don't you write a song that's got some meaning, like Stardust? She said, you and your brother write them little idly-boobly songs, and they don't have no meaning. I had just done. I said, you know that song I got called Humming? New one? Said, yeah. Said, you know, Quincy Jones recorded it, Cannonball recorded it, I recorded it. Said, you know that song is about old Miss Sally. She said, what? I said, you know, the rhythm represents that board hitting.
Oh,
boom, boom, boom. And the melody is something like them old gospel sounding thing. And Mama said, yeah, kind of skeptically, yeah, sure. But that night we were working down in the village at the place called the Village Gate. Mama came down that night. We played humming. Mama, she called me over the table. Hey, come here, boy. She said, you know, I listened to that song, and now that you told me what it means, said I could just see that old woman sitting on the porch and the board hitting. Said, you know, old Miss Sally said she's been dead about 15 years now. Said, but we all remember that old board hitting and stuff. She said, now that I see that, you know, and now that I say that I'm going to get off your case. That's when I knew Mama was hip. She said, she's going to get off my case. She said, I'm going to get off your case, and I'm going to let you go. Say, I agree. Your songs have meaning.
All right.
And that is the one for that one. Now, I gave you 3 examples. Let's get somewhere else.
Tell me how the farmers market and that whole thing came about.
Well, necessity is the mother of invention, and the necessity was money. I knew George Wallington's wife, who, you know, he was the piano player with the Lionel Hampton Band when I joined. He joined as well, and she took me down to see a man called Bob Weinstein, who owned Prestige Records, which was a very popular record label for young artists, well, Miles and people like that, who would be paid and who would sell their song and be very happy to sell it because it meant money in the hand. I met him, Moody's Mood had just come out, and he said to me, "Do you know Moody's Mood?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you think you could write words to an instrumental like Eddie Jefferson did?" Eddie having done Moody's Mood for Love, not King Pleasure.
Right.
So I said, "Yeah." I mean, if he'd asked me if I could fly, I would have said yes.
Yeah.
So he said, "Well, here's a pile of records. Go back to your place, pick one, write the words. When you're ready, come to me." Well, I was sharing a floor. I had a room in this big building where you shared the kitchen, you shared the bathroom, and it was, ugh. And so I was there the next morning with Twisted.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I hurried up and wrote those words. I got out of that place.
How did the initial
Idea?
come from that?
From the title,
Yeah.
Twisted.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, what would that be? And then I looked at myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I write very fast.
Uh-huh.
I'm very lazy. I really, I should be much more productive than I am. But
But when necessity...
take my time. Yeah.
Yeah.
When necessity calls, I really get to work.
I used to try to dress way more like a guy when I was first starting out in music. Oh yeah. I was so conscious of not being taken seriously. And there was one instance when I got called for a gig. I was like, "Is this Nick Perrott?" And I said, "Well, actually it's Nicky, and it's a bass player." "Yeah, Nicky Perrott," click, you know what I mean? So there was like an instance when I was like really fragile. I was still trying to learn how to play, and I was 18 or 19, and I noticed the guys I grew up with in Newcastle were getting all these great gigs, and I was like, first time I was aware, oh God, I'm a woman in this business. You know what I mean? It was like the first time I'd really become aware of, well, maybe it's going to be different for me to them, in a way, or subtle differences. But, I've been one of the lucky ones though. I've been a professional musician, like I said, for basically 22 years with an eight-month stint in fashion. These days it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter woman, man, black, white, anything. It's just a more difficult time to be a musician and make a living. So it doesn't really, all of that stuff has gone to the wayside because economically it's a challenge whoever you are. It doesn't matter anymore.
Okay.
That's how I feel now. I feel like it's much more pretty much an even playing field, you know what I mean? Where there are gigs to be had and you have to work very hard at getting them, it seems. And really, I'm just happy to play with good people, There's also a lot of people that just wouldn't hire a girl musician for whatever reason. Still. Yeah, still. Yeah, it happens. And it's just, does it happen less? I'm sure it happens less. But does it still happen? Yeah. It doesn't bother me. I still work.
Mm-hmm.
I still travel. Maybe I don't want to work with them. So
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't really care so much about the politics anymore as long as I'm playing with good people.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I have the respect for musicians that I admire, then really who cares in the end?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like if you start worrying about the gigs you're not doing, you can get really dark and bitter quickly.
Yeah. How did jazz come to you in Japan? Was it through a records
Yes, yes, yes. When I was 14 years old, young boy, I heard that one record, SP record. My father liked classic music, was Mozart, Beethoven, and Mendelssohn, all SP record. And then I found a very small record, SP record. And I had that record. I was very surprised the other music. What kind of music I saw a record label, and Don't Be That Way by Benny Goodman. But only this. And what kind of music? I didn't know jazz. And then I saw a record label, only foxtrot. Do you know foxtrot?
Oh, foxtrot. Yes,
foxtrot.
sure, certainly.
But when I was 14 years old, I didn't know what mean foxtrot, and then I understand this music, the foxtrot, and then I went to school and I told my schoolmates, I had a very funny music, foxtrot, by Benny Goodman, and I was very surprised. And then this was my treasure record.
Yes, you just had that one,
Only
just one record.
Just one.
Was there a tune on the other side? Yeah.
I forgot the other side, something play small. Benny Goodman trio plays something. The other very fast tempo number. But I like Don't Be That Way with orchestra. And then when I was 16 years old, this Second War ended, Japanese, and I had Far East Network radio. I have, and all days play just a jazz program. And so I must play something other.
You were hearing lots of foxtrots.
Yes. And then I knew jazz music.
All right.
And then I should begin some jazz music. And when I was a child, I started at classic piano. And my mother likes classic, my father likes classic, and I play piano, only classic piano. And then I want to play the clarinet like Benny Goodman.
So, were you self-taught on the clarinet then, in the beginning?
Yeah. When I was 19 years old, I play the clarinet. And it was very funny. My classmate, he got one clarinet. And he couldn't play clarinet. Many classmates try to blow the clarinet. And then I try clarinet blow, and boo, boo. Oh, it's genius. My classmate always say. And then I have to push key. I don't know. And then I found only two notes. Boo, 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 boo. Oh, easy played the Sentimental Journey. Boo, boo, boo. Only did.
But you can only play the first few measures.
And then my classmates said, "Age is genius." And then I began clarinet.
I don't want to tell you about all my downfall, but I have to tell you anyway because it's true. I was directing for a band, for Joe Simon band. He was a singer singing the blues, Pretty Little Bit of One, you know, Joe Simon. So he was in New York at the Apollo Theater
And he had the big headline in it, and they had under him the 5 Step Brothers and the Jackson 5. So I went, the 5 Step Brother came on first, and I heard them you kids playing. I said, oh man, look at them kids playing this music. I went back there and I told Joe, I said, Joe, you gotta come out here and see these kids play this music. Oh man, don't worry about that. This was a 5 Step Brother. Oh, don't worry about that. He's the headliner. So after 5 Step Brother came out, then the Jackson 5 came out. Joe Jackson playing the guitar, and his brothers all the thing. And I heard them, I said, oh man, they got to come and hear these kids is better than these other kids. So it's all, don't worry about it. I said, okay. He came out on that stage, and man, them boys burnt that stage. That stage was so hot. I'm directing. I said, okay, fellas, here. Pop, boop, beep, pop, boop, beep, pop, boop, beep. Joe Simon, everybody. The curtain open up, and he come walking out there, and the people just looked at him. He couldn't do nothing. That stage was too hot. He started singing, Frankie and Johnny went hunting, or whatever that was. Them 2 boys. I met, so old man Joe talked to me, and he said, I need some help with the kid. You can do by me being in the band. I said, well, I'm trying to talk to Joe and get Joe to talk to you, because they had a recording company in Nashville. Maybe we can do something with them kids, you know. Nothing happened. I met Joe. I met Michael Jackson then. He was only 11 or 12 years old. And blew that thing. Donna Roy come out right back behind me and took him down to Motown, and the rest of it is history. I could be a millionaire now. That's not bad. But listen to this one. My little nephew came to, Uncle Charles, you got to hear the little blind boy play this piano. He lived on the same block, on Humble Street, the same block in Detroit with my brother, with my sister. Oh, they worried the hell out of me. Come and hear these kids, hear this blind boy play. I said, oh, go and get it. Oh, Todd called me, Michael, Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder come down to my sister's house, and little kid must have been about 10 years old. Came in, I said, go ahead and play. Oh, and he just playing. Well, by me being such a old musician, I seen other young musicians, young kids, play much more than what Steve was playing to me. Now that he probably was playing a lot, but I wasn't paying attention to it. So I said, oh, little kid came. I said, oh yeah, he went on about his business. 2 years later, Joe Hunter met Stevie Wonder, took him down to Motown. The rest is history. I had some bad breaks.
That could have been another million, your second million.
I had some bad breaks, man. Look at it. Oh, so I know that'll make you laugh. True jank. I missed both of them.
Roy had quite a competitive spirit, didn't he?
Listen, I've never played with anyone that loved to play as much as him. Never. And my greatest story, every time I tell somebody this, they always say, love it, but I'm going to tell it so this will be on film forever. I'll never forget, we were playing in a place, and it was no one in the place. It's just like this room we're in now. Mm-hmm. But the band, we were up there playing, and I was just back there. And he turned around and he leaned over the drum set at me. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, Roy, man, I said, there's nobody in here. You know, I said, nobody. He said, he looked me right in, he got closer. He said, I'm here. It was the scariest thing, in the way he said it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it made a difference in me. He said, I'm here. It was play. Because that's what he did. I've heard him play some of the greatest music I ever heard in a room just like this with nobody in it. Uh-huh. He loved that horn. It was just like, that's why when he did his funeral, when Dizzy said, he said, y'all got to find something else to do now. He said, because this is the only person was ever named Jazz.
Yeah, yeah.
Said he's the only one was ever named Jazz, and that's what he was. I've seen him. I mean, Joe Jones told me, he said, one of these days, you're gonna be playing with him, man, and he's gonna take you out of that drum seat. He's gonna lift you right out of that drum seat. I say, man, now that is really deep. I didn't pay that much, but he did.
Yeah.
Right up in Toronto one time.
Really?
Oh, God. You know, I had this feature on Caravan that we did, and when he got to the bridge one time, boy, I mean, it was just like, it was so dynamic. It just like, I couldn't even play. It just took me away. I'm telling you, it was like, whew, it was unbelievable. I never felt nothing like that before in my life.
Do you have jazz majors?
Yeah.
So, you able to give them advice on what their possibilities are after they graduate?
Oh yeah. Well, the ones that are serious, we usually have a talk right around the sophomore, junior year, and it's different for these the age that we're teaching now than it was for us. The advice that they can't do what I did, because what I did doesn't exist anymore. You know, go out in the big band, maybe get a name. I mean, almost everything that happened to me happened because I was on Maynard's band, and I maybe took advantage of it afterwards. Doing these clinics and all this business, you know, it all came because people saw me with that band, and you know, then you're able to keep it going. Most of us that have been on the bands, a lot of the, like when I think about the people I know who are doing things now, they either were with like Count's band or like Duke's band or Woody's band or Stan's band or Maynard's band or Buddy's band, you know. And when these guys leave, they either go to Chicago, New York, or LA for the most part. And there's pockets of, you know, like guys and they've all had that kind of experience. So, but now that whole band thing doesn't exist. So when I'm, and I don't want to say it shouldn't, it just doesn't. It is what it is. But when a student starts talking now about, you know, what am I going to do when I get out, I get them on in my office and we look at YouTube and I talk to them about how certain people have to, well, you have to kind of design your own life. There's nothing that you're going to go to and join and that's going to be your life in jazz. It does, you know, it's not going to exist. However, you look up, look at some of the people who are creating their own thing. And we'll pull up like, you know, Leo Pellegrino, Too Many Zoos. He's a baritone sax player. He's playing in a right. He's playing with, and so I'll pull that up. And I sent him a neck strap because I'm concerned about he's jumping up and down. But he's but I said, look at what he did. Now, no one would think you're going to make a living doing this, but he put this up. Social media is a big part of it. You know, you get your stuff out there. You have to develop your own audience. You develop your own audience, so your audience comes and sees you. Where before you would play a gig to sell your CDs. Now you're giving away CDs to hope they come to your gig, kind of, because it's so you have to have, you know, how do you develop your audience? You got to have an online presence. It's all the stuff that didn't exist before. Have a website. People start to follow you. People ask you questions. You answer them back. You have to be, you know. And I have a couple students that have gone out and been successful, but part of the work is this online activity that's very much a part of it all. In fact, I've asked somebody, we have a music industry major at our school, and these guys that teach it are like, they're all about this thing. They're all about this online thing. And I asked one of the guys, I said, how do you get a record deal these days? Because the record deal thing, the way it used to work was different. You know, you had a name, like Sal Nestico played with Woody Herman, great tenor player. Sal gets off the band, Sal's got recordings. Oh, let's follow Sal, you know, that's over. How do we do this? And he goes, well, the first thing I said, what do record companies even do? And he says, if you came to a record company, one of the guys told me that the record company is going to look at your social media, see how many followers you have. And if you have enough followers, then I'll just create a real nice, slick, you know, video for you, and we're just going to post it on the followers that you've already made, and there's your audience. So if you have enough followers, you're more apt to get a record deal. Not that the music isn't that important, but it's almost not as important as how many followers you have. No one's going to listen to it and say, man, that's great tenor playing. They're going to say, who's going to follow you? Nobody. Well, then we're not interested. So I think, wow, that's a whole change. But they need to know that. And as a teacher, teaching something that is like an art form of, it's an art form. And the society around it is changing so quickly, you can't look at it like the way it used to work. But it's doable, and there are some kids doing it. So some of my students, they get on it. It's not that foreign for a lot of them. And they have a big presence. And because now it used to be the club would advertise it, you would go and play, and you get paid, and hopefully somebody would show up. But now they want to guarantee you that you're going to bring your peeps to the gig. Right? So you have to guarantee like 35 people before you get, but for some kids it's not a problem because they're active on the social media. And that's a thing that never happened with, that didn't even exist before. And when I had to learn that was I don't want to say it was a bitter pill, but it was so opposite of how I came up but we talk about it and we look, and Colin Stetson, this fellow plays bass saxophone and he sets up a loop. He does these concerts. It's great playing. It's unbelievable playing. Never heard of. Put it up there, and I have about 5 different people that I show my students. Look at what they're doing. This is what you have to do if you want to have a future in it. Because what I did is gone. It's not a bad thing. It's just it's what it is.
Yeah.
Also hurts me to, it disturbs me to see somebody of my race talking about somebody white and saying, oh man, he can't play, never could, when this person they're talking about is a monster, which indicates to me that you don't have to be of any particular racial persuasion to be good at jazz. All that stuff about, this is our music, nobody can play this music but us. Forget it. Anybody, not anybody individually. I don't think every person born into this world is a jazz musician.
Right.
And I don't agree with somebody's got something out that says everybody can improvise. I don't go with
Oh,
that.
that's right. There's a series. Anybody can improvise.
I don't subscribe to that. But, it's an individual thing. It's not necessarily it's not a racial thing. We have such a melting pot here till we're all into each other's culture. Okay, I contend that jazz was born in America as a result of the black experience. Now, nobody in the world could ever convince me that that isn't true. Okay? But now, as I said before, we got this melting pot where we're all into each other's culture. We can emulate one another, and we can relate to one another. And talent wasn't just given to whites or blacks or Latinos or Asiatics or whatever. Every racial, ethnic group has talent. And all God's children got rhythm. Some more than others. Look, man, I know some black folks who can't clap on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know some folks that can't do this. 1, 2, 3. On the other hand, I know some white folks every time will say, and vice versa,
Yeah.
So we've all got talented people, and we've all got some no talented people.
Yeah.
Every ethnic and racial group has somebody blowing a horn that should put it down and forget and be a plumber or a postman or something.
Right.
But when I hear somebody who's not black perform on an instrument and that person is good, they're good, regardless of what somebody else black might say. Oh, he can't play, she can't play. And it hurt me years ago. I had one of my trumpet players. Do you know, are you familiar with Lou Soloff?
Certainly.
Well, this guy just put Lou Soloff in the garbage can. He can't play. He never could. And Lou Soloff is a monster. Lou Soloff, he can play anything. He can play jazz. He can play lead trumpet. He can play in a section. He can, you know, he can just do anything that's necessary for a jazz trumpeter to do. Big band, small group, whatever. So when one of us can do it, give us the credit. When one of them can do it, give them the credit. It ain't about, you know, I don't feel threatened by anybody.
Mm-hmm.
If you can play and you're white, great. Let's play together.
All right.
If you can't play and you're white,
Go play with someone else.
yeah, do something. If you can't play and you're black, get out of here.
Go play with that white guy
Yeah, right.
who can't play.
Yeah, yeah.